The PlayStation 2 had some of the most jaw-dropping RPGs ever made. And no, I'm not just talking about graphics. These games went hard on atmosphere, style, and ambition in ways we rarely see today. So, if you're ready to revisit a time when your jaw dropped from a pre-rendered cutscene, buckle up, because we're diving into the most impressive RPGs that ever hit the PS2.
What?
Jody.
Zone of the Enders: The Second Runner is one of those games that felt like it arrived from the future. It threw you into the cockpit of a high-speed mecha called Jehudi and never let up. The combat is fast, fluid, and surprisingly stylish for a game that came out on the PlayStation 2. You're not just flying around and shooting, you're dashing through missiles, slicing enemies mid-air, grabbing and slamming other mechs into walls, and pulling off insane combos like it's second nature. Jehudi controls like an extension of your own reflexes, with movement that feels more like a dance than a dogfight. Close-range and long-range attacks blend seamlessly, and the game constantly encourages aggressive play by rewarding precision and timing. You've got sub-weapons like homing lasers, energy spears, and the iconic zero-shift dash, which basically lets you teleport behind enemies and chain attacks before they can even react. And when you nail a perfect sequence, boosting in, grabbing an enemy, slamming them into another, and finishing with a charged slash, it feels unbelievably satisfying. Visually, it was way ahead of its time, with cinematic camera angles and slick anime-inspired cutscenes that made every mission feel like an episode of something straight out of a late-night mech series. Kojima Productions built a custom engine specifically to deliver speed and intensity without sacrificing performance, and it shows. The game was designed to run at 60 frames per second, and even with explosions, energy trails, and enemy swarms flying across the screen, it holds that frame rate like a champ. The visuals lean into a refined cell shading style. Not the thick outlined cartoonish look, but a sleek, anime-inspired aesthetic that gives every mech and effect a clean, stylized finish. Motion blur and depth of field effects add a cinematic punch to every boost and slash. And these weren't common on PS2. They were manually implemented with clever post-processing tricks and buffer juggling. But beneath all the flash, there's a solid sci-fi story running under the surface, full of political tension, personal drama, and questions about identity and control. Dragon Quest VIII was a turning point for the franchise and one of the most polished RPGs to ever land on the PlayStation 2. It took everything fans loved about the series, like turn-based combat, charming characters, quirky enemies, and gave it a full 3D makeover without losing the soul of the original games. The art style, crafted by the legendary Akira Toriyama, still looks gorgeous to this day, and the fully explorable world was massive for its time. You could roam across wide-open fields, stumble into hidden caves, and take on side quests that felt meaningful instead of just filler. Level 5 built a custom engine just for Dragon Quest VIII, and it became the backbone for future hits like Rogue Galaxy and White Knight Chronicles. And this wasn't just about making the jump to 3D, it was about doing it with style. The cel-shaded visuals brought Akira Toriyama's artwork to life like never before, giving every character that signature look while keeping the world bright and expressive. Animations were super detailed for the time, with characters showing emotion through facial expressions and body language, which made story moments hit harder. The game pushed the PS2 with massive open areas, smart use of fog and LOD to keep the draw distance clean, and dynamic lighting that added depth without melting the console. It held a steady 30 frames per second, even with enemies roaming the overworld, and battles transitioned quickly and cleanly, with minimal load times and a seamless visual style that kept you immersed. The voice acting also added life to every scene, especially with characters like Yangus, stealing the show with every line. Combat was simple on the surface but packed with strategic depth, especially with the tension system that let you build up power for a devastating blow. And the story? It balanced humor, tragedy, and epic moments in a way that few RPGs managed to pull off. Final Fantasy X-2 is one of the boldest sequels the franchise ever dropped. It picks up 2 years after the events of Final Fantasy X, but trades the heavy drama and tragedy for a faster, more upbeat tone. You're following Yuna, now a sphere hunter, traveling with Riku and newcomer Pain across Spira in search of answers and lost memories. The game threw a lot of fans off with its pop idol energy and lighter vibe, but under the surface it hides one of the deepest job systems in the entire series. The dress sphere mechanic lets you switch classes mid-battle, with flashy animations and tons of strategy. Each outfit changes how your characters fight, and mastering the system opens up a crazy amount of possibilities in combat. The game also leans hard into player choice, with multiple endings depending on what you do and how much of the world you explore. Visually, the game took full advantage of the engine from Final Fantasy X, but didn't just copy and paste. Square optimized the whole thing, adding smoother animations, faster battle transitions, and way more expressive characters. The focus on real-time cutscenes instead of pre-rendered videos gave everything a more dynamic, consistent look, and it helped the game feel more alive during dialogues and story beats. Yuna, Riku, and Pain all had more fluid movement and a wider range of facial expressions, which matched the lighter tone perfectly. The environments leaned into bright colors and tropical vibes, with updated shaders and lighting tricks that made everything pop without killing the PS2's performance. Even with the flashier battles and bigger areas, it held a solid 30 frames per second throughout, proving that style and speed could go hand in hand. Final Fantasy X-2 may look like a playful detour, but it's secretly one of the most flexible and replayable entries in the entire series. Shadow of the Colossus is not your typical RPG, but it earns a spot on this list for being one of the most visually striking and emotionally powerful experiences on the PlayStation 2. It drops you into a vast, empty world where your only goal is to hunt down 16 massive colossi. No towns, no dungeons, no random battles, just you, your horse, and these towering beasts. Each fight feels like a puzzle mixed with a boss battle, where you have to figure out how to climb, stab, and survive against creatures that are literally the size of buildings. What makes Shadow of the Colossus even more mind-blowing is how much it squeezed out of the PS2's aging hardware. The Team Eco built a custom engine from scratch. Yeah, completely in-house, tailored specifically to handle massive open environments, dynamic physics, and those jaw-dropping colossi without turning the whole thing into a slideshow. There are no loading screens once you're in the world, thanks to a clever streaming system that pulls data straight from the disk in real time. That kind of seamless exploration was nearly unheard of back then. And let's talk visuals. This game pulled off full motion blur on the PS2, a console that wasn't even designed to support that effect. They hacked it in manually, using frame buffers and transparency tricks, which gave movement this fluid, cinematic quality that still holds up. To sell the scale of the world, the game used aggressive level of detail and dynamic culling to keep distant objects rendering smoothly without melting the console. And maybe the coolest part? The Colossi animations weren't fully pre-baked. They used procedural systems to simulate things like weight, balance, and how their bodies reacted when you climbed them. That's why it feels so raw and unpredictable when you're hanging onto a beast the size of a skyscraper and it starts thrashing around. The scale of everything is insane, and even today, few games have matched the sense of awe this one delivers. But what really makes it hit hard is the atmosphere, the silence, the loneliness, the music that kicks in just as you start climbing a colossus. It all builds this weight that stays with you long after the game is over. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me which PS2 RPG you think is the most impressive and why. I check every single one, and yep, I actually reply too. Comments help feed the algorithm and keep the channel alive with fresh content. And if you haven't subscribed yet, well, consider this your friendly reminder from the algorithm fairy. She's watching. Always. Tales of the Abyss brought one of the most ambitious stories of the franchise to the PlayStation 2, mixing political intrigue, identity crises, and world-shaking secrets into a single, fast-paced adventure. You play as Luke, a spoiled noble who starts off insufferable and clueless, but gradually transforms into someone who actually earns the title of hero. That character growth is one of the game's strongest points, and it doesn't shy away from showing how painful and messy change can be. Combat in Tales of the Abyss builds on the classic linear motion battle system the series is known for, but adds some major upgrades that make fights feel way more dynamic. The big one is the free run feature, which lets you move freely in 3D space instead of being locked to a straight line towards your target. On top of that, there's the Field of Phonon system, where elemental energy builds up on certain parts of the battlefield, and if you time your arts right, you can trigger enhanced versions with extra effects. The world itself feels alive, packed with lore, ancient tech, and conflicts that actually evolve over time instead of staying frozen in place. And the voice acting was surprisingly solid for the era, especially in key emotional scenes. Even though it didn't go all in on flashy visuals, Tales of the Abyss had a lot going on behind the scenes. It ran on an upgraded version of the engine from Tales of Symphonia, but had to be fine-tuned to fit within the PS2's tighter memory and processing limits. The visual style leaned into soft cell shading and clean outlines, matching the anime look of Kosuke Fujishima's character designs without overloading the system. The game balanced 2D anime cutscenes with 3D in-engine scenes, keeping everything consistent and smooth. Skits got a nice upgrade too, with facial animations that added personality to even the smaller moments. It also introduced the free run system, which meant reworking the camera and collision system to handle full 3D movement. While it wasn't free from frame rate dips during heavy combat, it kept things running clean with quick transitions and clever loading tricks hidden in the background. Manakemia 2 is one of those hidden gems that mixes RPG combat with alchemy and school life in a way that feels both chaotic and addictively fun. Set in an academy where students train to become master alchemists, the game throws you into a loop of crafting, exploring, and building relationships with your classmates. But don't let the cute art fool you, there's a lot of depth here. Built on an upgraded version of the engine used in the Atelier Iris games, it blends detailed character sprites with layered, semi-3D backgrounds that give the world depth without overloading the PS2. The sprite work is seriously impressive, and each character is packed with personality through smooth animations and expressive reactions during both dialogue and combat. The battle effects pop with bursts of color, flashy particle effects, and dramatic transitions that make every special move feel like a big moment. The UI is clean and fast, matching the game's anime aesthetic and keeping the pace snappy. And despite all the visual flair, it runs smooth the whole way through. The animated cutscenes sprinkled throughout the story just seal the deal, adding that extra bit of polish that makes the whole thing feel like an interactive anime. The turn-based combat is fast and flashy, with a unique tag system that lets characters jump in and out mid-battle for devastating combos. And the crafting system isn't just a side feature, it's the core of everything. You're constantly gathering ingredients, creating gear, and customizing your builds based on what you make. And outside of battles, the game lets you roam the campus, take on quirky side quests, and dive into each character's personal story. It's all wrapped in a lighthearted tone, but there's enough drama and charm to keep you hooked. Shadow Heart's Covenant takes everything the first game built and cranks it up in the best way possible. It's darker, funnier, and way more confident in its weirdness. The story kicks off in the middle of World War I, but forget anything you know about real history. This is a twisted version full of demons, magic, and cursed bloodlines. The main cast feels like a bunch of misfits you somehow end up loving. You've got a sarcastic shapeshifter, a priest who wrestles in his spare time, and a vampire who fights with cursed inventions. The game mixes gothic horror with absurd humor in a way that shouldn't work, but totally does. Combat is turn-based, but uses a timing system called the Judgment Ring that keeps you on your toes. It's not just press button and wait. You have to hit precise zones on a spinning wheel to land criticals, cast spells, or even use items. Visually, it's one of the most atmospheric RPGs on the PS2, with creepy towns, eerie lighting, and a soundtrack that goes from haunting to epic in seconds. The team at Nautilus built a custom engine just for the PS2, evolving it from the one used in the first game, and this time everything runs in full 3D. That shift allowed for more dynamic environments and dramatic camera angles that feel ripped straight from a horror movie. Lighting plays a huge role too, with soft shadows and moody highlights, giving places like cemeteries and crumbling churches a heavy, supernatural vibe. Characters also got a bump in expressiveness, with detailed facial animations during key scenes that help sell the emotional weight of the story. But what really ties it all together is how seamless everything feels. Cutscenes flow straight into gameplay without jarring transitions, and even with all the spell effects and big enemy encounters, the game keeps a steady performance that makes the whole thing feel tight and polished. Suikoden 5 is one of those RPGs that hits different once you realize how deep it actually goes. On the surface, it's a political drama wrapped in fantasy clothing, but underneath, it's a masterclass in world-building, character development, and long-term storytelling. You start off playing a prince caught in the middle of a brutal power struggle within the royal family, and things spiral fast. Betrayals, alliances, secret factions, every move feels like it matters, and the emotional payoff keeps building. But what really makes a Suikoden 5 stand out is the way it handles its cast. We're talking over 100 recruitable characters, each with their own backstories and uses in battle, or in your growing castle. Some are powerful warriors, others are cooks, builders, or tacticians who help expand your base. The turn-based combat might seem traditional at first, but the mix of party formations, runes, and special combos gives you way more control than it looks. And while the story and characters do most of the heavy lifting, Suikoden 5 also stepped things up on the technical side. The game was built on a custom engine from Konami, designed specifically for the PS2, and it ditched the flat pre-rendered backdrops from earlier entries in favor of fully 3D environments. That shift made the world feel more immersive, with smoother camera movement and bigger, more explorable spaces. The character models were noticeably more detailed, especially considering the massive cast, and key scenes featured facial animations that added emotion without relying on full CG. Load times were cleverly masked with transitional cutaways and ambient animations, which helped maintain the pacing even in large areas like your evolving castle. The frame rate could dip a bit in crowded scenes, but overall the game ran solid, delivering a consistent experience with strong art direction that made every location feel handcrafted. It's a game that rewards patience and curiosity, and by the time the credits roll, you feel like you've led a full-blown rebellion with people who actually matter.
The spell of dark ice.
Odin's Sphere looks like a moving painting, and back on the PlayStation 2, it was unlike anything else on the system. Developed by Vanillaware, this action RPG throws you into a world full of mythology, betrayal, and heartbreak, all told through the stories of 5 different characters whose fates slowly intertwine. The combat is fast and flashy, but there's depth too. You're juggling combos, managing stamina, and using alchemy to cook up powerful potions mid-fight. And when you're not fighting, you're planting seeds and growing food to boost your stats. It sounds weird, but it works. But what really makes Odin's Sphere stand out, though, is the way it blends its story and gameplay. Each character's arc feels personal, and the narrative hits harder because you're seeing the same events from different angles. The art style, the soundtrack, the way it all flows together, it's just pure magic. And behind all that storybook beauty, Odin's Sphere was running on a custom 2D engine built from the ground up by Vanillaware. Instead of chasing 3D trends, they doubled down on high-res sprites, layered backgrounds, and frame-by-frame animation that made every movement feel fluid and alive. The characters aren't just well-drawn, they're hand-animated with way more frames than most games dared to use at the time. Add in dynamic lighting, particle effects, and a ton of transparent overlays, and it pushed the PS2 hard, sometimes a little too hard. The game did suffer from frame rate drops during heavy battles, but the trade-off was a visual style that felt like a painting in motion. George Kamitani's direction was inspired by old European children's books, and that influence shows in every corner of the game. And nothing was recycled. Every attack, every motion, every detail was handcrafted. It was so ambitious that years later, they had to rebuild it with a new engine for Odin Sphere Lifthrasir, which kept the same gorgeous look, but finally gave it the performance it always deserved. Disgaea Hour of Darkness is one of those games that looks completely harmless on the surface, but then hits you with some of the deepest and most chaotic strategy gameplay you'll ever find. It's a tactical RPG where battles play out on grid-based maps, but everything is cranked to 11. Characters can level up to 9,999, you can deal billions of damage, and there's even a mode where you dive into your own weapons to level them up from the inside. It sounds ridiculous because it is, but that's the charm. Technically, Disgaea might not look like much at first glance, but it was built with purpose. The team at Nippon Ichi created their own engine specifically for grid-based strategy games, combining 2D character sprites with 3D isometric maps, and that mix gave players full camera control without sacrificing performance. The visual style leans into simplicity, clear, colorful, and clean, so even when the battlefield is packed with units, effects, and menus, everything stays readable. And that's important because Disgaea isn't light on numbers. We're talking massive damage values, level caps in the thousands, and complex systems all running smoothly thanks to how optimized everything is. The effects might be flashy, but they're fast, and the UI stays snappy even when you're juggling dozens of characters and menus. The story follows Laharl, a spoiled demon prince trying to reclaim his throne, and the writing is packed with sharp humor, anime absurdity, and a surprising amount of heart. But what really makes Disgaea special is the sheer amount of freedom it gives you. You can build absurd teams, throw enemies across the map, chain attacks with perfect timing, or just grind endlessly in the item world. It's overwhelming at first, but once it clicks, it becomes one of the most addictive RPG systems out there. Disgaea is proof that you don't need realism to make a strategy game hit hard. You just need chaos, charm, and a lot of exploding penguins. Dark Cloud 2 mixes city building, dungeon crawling, and time travel in a way that somehow just works. You start with a wrench and a camera, and before you know it, you're rebuilding entire towns and restoring the future by fixing the past. The combat is real-time and surprisingly smooth, with a wide range of weapons that evolve the more you use them. But what really makes this game stand out is how much stuff there is to do. One minute you're fishing, the next you're inventing gadgets, then suddenly you're deep inside a randomly generated dungeon fighting robots and monsters. The Georama system lets you rebuild the world piece by piece, and every decision you make has ripple effects. And all that variety wouldn't hit the same if the game didn't look and run as good as it did. Dark Cloud 2 was built on a custom engine by Level 5, upgraded from the one used in the first game, and it laid the foundation for later titles like Dragon Quest VIII and Rogue Galaxy. The cel-shaded visuals weren't just stylish, they were cutting-edge for the PS2, combining anime-inspired art with dynamic lighting and real-time shadows that made the world feel alive. Characters had expressive faces and even synced lip movements, which was a rare flex back then. The game handled big open areas using smart level of detail and fog tricks to keep pop-in minimal. and somehow managed to stay smooth even with real-time combat, exploration, and the Georama system all running at once. That modular town-building mechanic pushed the engine to load and manage tons of custom objects on the fly. And it all just worked without breaking a sweat. Even years later, it still surprises you with how creative and packed it is. And hey, if you're already writing a massive comment because I criminally forgot some legendary classics, just know this is part 2 of the series. So maybe check out part 1 before roasting me too hard in the comments. Or go ahead and yell at me here, then apologize over there. Either way, make sure to subscribe and comment on both videos to help your buddy Sage keep the channel going.